sometimes when working like that, both people who were just talking said that they found the homes getting colder. And that is something to pay attention to. Of course, if the room is getting colder or anything, that's a possibility. But it's also very common, particularly people who are not blood full, that what happens is when we warm an area, two things can happen. The pores open, and then we move on, and suddenly it gets quite cool. We were doing liniments last weekend, and one of the things that can happen with a warming liniment is it seems great, and then you go outside, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm really sensitive to the wind. And that's because you have a liniment that's forcing your pores open, a warming liniment, and then the temperature of the room or the air or the wind hitting it. So I will often have my various cloths, and then wherever I just worked, I'll put some sort of weight of cloth so that their body heat doesn't just warm and then leave, that their body heat comes up and hits something, and then I'll move on. And then usually, once it's had a moment, it can reset, and I can use the same cloth in other parts. The other thing that happens is that, especially when you're working with very deficient patients, they only have so much qi and blood. They're low, they're deficient. And anytime I'm working that creates warming, aside from the friction, their body is going to produce, all their qi and blood is going to come towards it. It's a little bit like at night, if you go somewhere with fish and you shine a light, everybody comes to the light. And when I'm working and I make this area quite yang with warmth, the body's going to be like, ooh, and things are going to start leaving. And so what happens is a lot of times the body starts to go cold because what was somewhat evenly spread through the body ends up all coming up to one area or down to another area. Where you see it is when working here, the person feels cold in the legs, but interestingly, where they talk a lot about it in some of the old books is when the legs suddenly get very, very warm for the first time. You know, a person always has cold feet. And then you do a lot of work and the feet suddenly just go whoop and fill. They suddenly get very afraid of wind or cold, or Zhenjing and Feng Shui, Feng Fu all of a sudden get very cold because their yang just dropped down. And now there isn't enough yang up top. Line 115 of the Shanghai Lun, if you have the same version I do, remember the lines came later. So as long as you look in front and below of 115, you'll find that line that refers to what happens when the qi gets stuck up and then the qi goes down below and the person has those problems. So those are the major things. Finally, if your touch is too light and starts to not unwittingly get lighter and lighter, you actually are starting to do the combing, and then they get the goosebumpy, tingly, and without realizing it, you kind of created that heaven layer. And that's why we finish with the patting and the firm rub, is to make sure everything's back down in them.